Hello and welcome to Panorama Consulting Group's webinar today. My name is Jennifer Oldemeyer and I'm going to be your host and moderator. Today I'll be chatting with some intrepid ERP experts from Panorama Consulting Group, Steve Benz and Ed Spots. We'll be discussing data conversion challenges common to enterprise software projects. Steve and Ed, could you both please introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, my name is Steve Benz. 30 years of experience in various ERP implementation selection processes across a multiple of industries as well as municipalities. I've worked with from supply chain, finance, warehouse management, and again, as well as customers, I should say, citizen support groups. Okay?
Hi, I'm Ed Spots. I started my career as an engineer and went through an ERP implementation on the other end of things. Later, as my career progressed, I got into implementing ERP systems at my own company. And then I've moved on to Panorama, where I've been here for almost a decade now. And we are always looking for ways to improve, and data conversion is always a challenge. So looking forward to this discussion today.
Thank you for that. I'm sure there will be many questions about this subject matter, so you're invited to submit your questions in the questions panel, and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. Before handing the baton to Steve and Ed, I'll do a quick introduction of Panorama Consulting Group. Panorama is an independent enterprise software consulting firm specializing in everything from ERP selection to ERP implementation to business process management. Many of Panorama's consultants have worked on software expert witness engagements, giving them a vivid understanding of project risks. Panorama serves a number of different markets, from manufacturing to field service to government. The Panorama team has done several hundred software consulting engagements. They have a broad range of customers in terms of size, location, and industry. Panorama has also had the opportunity to work with a great number of software vendors. This not only includes ERP, but also warehouse management systems, CRM systems, and other types of enterprise software. So to kick off today's webinar, I'll let Steve discuss some of the data challenges he's seen in client engagements. Steve, you've worked in a number of industries, from technology to oil and gas to consumer packaged goods. I imagine many of these industries are moving from legacy systems and spreadsheets to some very modern systems. How difficult is data conversion for these companies?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Let's back up a little bit and talk about really separate different kinds of data we're dealing with and the difficulty with each type. We have master data. This is a single source of truth of your business data. It's used across multiple systems. For instance, you might have your customer master address information in your ERP system that shares with a CRM solution. You might have item master data in an ERP system that might be shared with your warehouse system. A single source of master, one-time modified, or at least very infrequently modified solution that's shared across applications if you have such a complex structure, as well as shared across multiple processes. So that data can be used in the procure to pay as well as the order to invoice type solutions. It's the same similar data. For examples, it might be your vendor address information, vendor contacts, customer addresses, customer names, contacts information. It could be formulas that identify pick locations at the warehouse or identifies when to order product, but it's very infrequently modified. It's kind of the upper header label of any data. It helps a business run efficiently, and the master data has to really well defined or understood. If you don't have good master data, everything behind it's going to fall apart. Another category, the second category, we get into transactional data. This is just a single point in time of a transaction between two entities, or within the process of the entity. It's really kind of a business indicator of that enterprise. They totally relies heavily on how accurate and managed your master data is. Certain items like, a specific customer order, information, a purchase order, invoice, shop floor job. So a very specific, a moment in time solution. So you got these two very distinct data definitions. You got your master data and you got your transactional data, and they work heavily together. If those aren't in sync, and not converted when you move to a new ERP system, or you're just going through a continuous improvement project, you're going to get into trouble. There's going to be a clash, if you will, between how these data work, because they're just so heavily reliant upon each other. Now, moving on, so I can answer your question, these newer ERP systems are getting more and more detailed, more and more complex in terms of the data requirements needed between these master and transactional information. For instance, there might be multiple dates on a sales order, where previously, maybe 20, 30 years ago, you had a single date, the date you shipped it or the date you received it. Now you can have 5, 6 dates on any one order, and you've got to understand where those dates coming from, who's going to master those dates, who's going to master the integrity of those dates, and what those dates do within the new ERP system. These new data requirements in today's world become more predictive. They're more prescriptive analytics. So you got dates, new date data, new sales order data, new customer information data that drives forecasts, drives sales order accuracy, and just generally drives more metrics across the supply chain and across your business overall. As ERP become more integrated, they connect to these CRM systems, these warehouse management systems, finance systems, HR. The level of data and the differences of those data needs to be maintained, and really needs to be who owns it, who owns the maintenance, who owns changing it, who owns continuously looking at it to drive opportunity. For instance, you see some ERPs are now fully integrated that a direct sales order for a product from a customer can drive an automatic purchase order. How does that work in the process? Who's driving the data dates, making sure lead times are successful, addresses, making sure formulas are in place, so when you place that sales order, you know who's placing that purchase order and where you're placing it and when is it due, and making sure it's accurate and driving it appropriately. New data requirements around forecasts. The new systems are coming with more powerful forecasting capability. So you can define a forecast, for instance, down to a depth of level of looking at individual customers, channels, geographical regions, and is your data set up like that? Is your as-is data set up so you can segregate between geographical location, channels, customer types, salesperson, etc. It's all getting very complex when you put the system in. Otherwise, you're not going to get the benefit that you got when you bought that ERP system. Moving on, with artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, it becomes more popular. Warehouses are implementing robots for pick locations. This drives replenish algorithms for even new pick ideas on where to pick that product. If you don't have that defined when you put the new ERP system in, or as you move up or upgrade to new ERP systems, you're not going to get that benefit. You're not going to get that return on investment. ERP vendors are very happy to explore all the new tricks and trades that they've got, all the new functionality. But if you don't have that supporting data, you're not going to get that return on investment. So defining that up front, defining the rules, the governance, opportunities behind that, that's key. But finally, again, like I've been mentioning, different levels of data is key, and the complexity of that, where before maybe a unit of measure, you may only have each unit, each single area. Now you can have items that have multiple unit of measures all in the same product. You can have eaches, boxes, cases, pallets. Customers can all buy all 3 or all 4 different items. They can buy all 4 on different sales orders, and they can have pricing differences between all those. So the data complexity just expands exponentially, given these changes of data and how these new systems are just becoming really powerful to help bring a good return on investment on their opportunity. Customer master data, multiple addresses. You can place sales orders from multiple customers or get sales orders. How are you going to define who ships what warehouse is shipping, what opportunity is shipping? What are the rules for that customer? And what are the rules for that customer, for that warehouse to ship to that location? Vendor masters. So as you understand, you might have multiple warehouses you ship from vendors. So what are those logistics to bring in product? Are you doing a drop ship solutions? Really understanding those master requirements. And finally, item master requirements. A new opportunity these ERP are offering is multiple ways to cost the product. Where is it based off of? If you're bringing something in from offshore, what are the costs, tariffs, and taxes associated with that versus inshore? If you have the same product coming from two locations, how do you manage the cost? The standard, the standard cost or a multiple cost for that item. All these things, from a summary perspective, really play into the complexity of converting from either an older system to a newer system, as the ERP vendors have really upped the ante on what they can offer businesses, cities, municipalities, etc. Jennifer?
Thanks, Steve. I definitely agree that vendors have definitely upped the ante. Earlier you mentioned prescriptive analytics. Can you define that?
So I'm talking specifically about, so the system doesn't just outlay the answer, but it can look at several components of data and provide an answer. So it can look across your data, across the fields, and say, hey, you've got this sales order, it's going to this region. It might provide a prescriptive solution for a logistics opportunity and say you may want to use this logistics company to ship it. We're talking forecasts. So it's looking at channels, customers, and even regions and defining what are some profit margin opportunities you can do with that. What are going to be some of the products you want to ship to that customer? You may have analytics as far as what are the most profitable customers, most profitable products, and bring those together. So the data can really get sliced and diced in various opportunities within the ERP system, where previously you may have tried to do that in a spreadsheet or tried to do that on pieces of paper. ERP vendors are now trying to get people away from that. So you're online and you can share that to multiple people to see that. Again, if I go back to that example, profit opportunities that you may be missing rather than being on somebody's spreadsheet and somebody's C drive. Does that help, Jennifer? Great question.
Thanks, Steve. So, Ed, if a company were to move forward without assessing their current data, I imagine their ERP system wouldn't be able to provide very reliable insights. How can companies avoid this?
That's a great point, Jennifer. Steve has whet our appetites with all the potential that new ERPs bring and all the things they can do. But it's a sobering thing when you are getting ready to implement a new ERP system because there are many, many challenges of doing so. And one of the big challenges is always data. That is your legacy data. And one of the characteristics that most companies have that have been using legacy systems for a long time, they've often purchased additional systems as satellites to that system. As Jennifer mentioned, there's a lot of times that data is kept in spreadsheets instead of in the system. And what that means is your data is probably not in control. And that's why we talk about establishing data governance. Data governance is a very, very broad topic, and we're going to only be able to touch on a few elements of it today. But if you don't establish that kind of data governance, you will have a lot of difficulties with your new implementation, and your new system will not likely run very smoothly until you clean it up. Some of the questions that we ask during data governance is, who owns a certain specific type of data? Sometimes the same sort of data, like part of a customer record is in CRM, part of a customer data is in the ERP, some of vendor data may be in the warehouse system, and other parts of it are in the ERP. And it's important to find all those data sources, identify all the data sources. And every time we do a selection, we ask our users for a list of their systems and what they're used for. And we always get a fairly extensive list. And then as we're going through requirements, somebody in the back of the group will say, but we keep this data over here in this spreadsheet, or we purchased this other little subsystem and there's more data in that. So finding where what all that data is, that will help with the requirements too, because if you've purchased those subsystems, that meant the core ERP system that you currently own didn't have the facilities you need to manage that data. So there's good reasons for having all those little subsystems, but the hope is when you buy a new modern ERP system that it will have a place to house all or at least most of that data, and you'll need far less subsystems and spreadsheets and the like to run your business. And so that's, again, it comes back to who owns that data. It can't be one person all by themselves. There can be somebody who is responsible, but that person who's the data owner for a specific type of data has to be able to network with other people in the organization and first of all, find all those places and then work together to determine what's the master. You may have different names, different addresses, different contact information in different systems. Well, maybe they're all valid for different purposes, but let's get it all sorted out and decide which is the correct answer. And that's for every type of the master data that Steve's been talking about. And that will definitely influence the transactional data, because transactions take place using master data for the most part. So data, Steve said that the master data changes fairly infrequently, but it does change. So one of the things you need to put in place is not only who owns the data, but what's the process. It isn't that one person who makes the decision. A vendor record, for instance, is used by manufacturing, by warehouse, by purchasing, a whole group of different people, and they all have different needs, but they need to all converge together in a coherent ERP record. And then you can't just look at the data alone. You need to identify the process inputs and the process outputs. What is the end result we're trying to get from that? And one of the things that will be a prominent thing during an ERP is management likes data. They like summary data, KPIs and the like. Those are driven by the data that's generated every day, but they're at a summary level. But you need to keep in mind both. You need to collect the detailed data in order to manage those metrics. And some of that detailed data is used by the on-the-ground team that's running the day-to-day business of the factory or the whatever kind of organization it is. And others are management. They need to look at a higher level point in what they're using to manage the company with. And so part of that change control process is also maintaining a history and a log. Changes very seldom can be implemented all at once. Sometimes there's a long rollout. So if you have inventory of one version, you probably want to sell the old inventory first, but maybe you have a customer that is very happy with that old inventory, but a different customer that needs the newer inventory. So it's a very complex, interactive challenge to do data governance and to have a process that works to make sure that the integrity of your data is maintained. Jennifer?
Thanks, Ed. So you mentioned all the variety of sources. Do you know any companies that have been able to consolidate all of their systems and not have any of those systems on the side, or do they usually keep maybe one or two?
There are often little subsystems, and tax is a very good example where you almost always will have a third-party system doing tax. Freight as well. You have to get the freight information from the carriers anyway, so there's very often an integration with a third-party system there. So that's a couple examples, but as a whole, companies are able to move a huge percentage of their data into the ERP system, and count your wins, don't worry about a few little exceptions.
Great, that's good to know. Steve, do you have more tips you'd like to share?
Sure, I may even be speaking on both sides of my mouth here, but I talk about data not being a constraining issue. Most likely it will be. It's going to be the critical path on most projects that I've experienced, and I'm sure Ed may agree, but how do you control that data? How do you focus? You see the slide here, don't let data be the constraining issue. I bring a little humor into that because it's going to be, but it's how do you control it? You know that right up front. So you try to put some focus. Where can I focus my data cleanup? And some suggestions I have is look at the ROI that allowed you to either buy a new ERP system or allowed you to upgrade your ERP system. What portion of that return, what feature, functionality set in the new ERP system allows you to get the greatest bang out of your buck with this new ERP? Maybe it's forecasting. Maybe it's improved customer information. Let's take customer information, for instance, as an example. So you're really hoping this ERP system is going to bring that return on customer data and holding that value proposition to your organization. Focus right while you're doing the implementation. How can I clean up my customer master data? How can I make sure all the customer addresses are in the right format? Are they viable addresses? Do they have the right tax codes associated with them? Are they in the right regions? Are they correctly identified? These are the types of things you can do early on or in sync with the actual implementation itself, is mastering that data and don't letting data be a synchronous of your project, but very synchronous, very parallel processes to ensure that data compliance. Start that right from the beginning. I also, as you identify ERP vendors or identify your processes, over test each scenario, map each data field for that data component. If you're looking at the procure to pay, you're looking at things like who are the suppliers, the inputs, the processes, the outputs, and customers associated with procure to pay. If you put in that SIPOC, we call it, and you create a table, and you can get very specific, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet, if I need to bring that up, or some data identification table, so you have identified in that procure to pay scenario who are all the suppliers of the data. Obviously, it's vendors. It might be warehouses. It might be certain customers or sales individuals that bring in what you're going to buy. What are the various inputs? What are the various processes that transform the data, that moves it from an actual purchase order to an actual invoice from the customer to payment? And what are your outputs? What are the metrics behind those outputs? And who are the customers? And that may be internal stakeholders as well. So you really understand the data depth, and you just break this down. So again, I'd over test each scenario and bring in a map and be very specific on what that data is, down to every data field as much as you can. So determine how your data needs to be understood to basically meet your business goals. Everybody appreciates intellectual property, patents, etc., those types of things. But I don't think we underestimate the importance of your data. Your IT manager probably doesn't, your supply chain person doesn't, but the importance of your data and how your data is different than your competitors, different than your vendors, makes you unique. So if you can really manage your data as a value proposition, as well as uniqueness, competitive advantage, that will help you drive, priorities, individuals, and getting the right people, the right systems in place to make sure your data is important. And then identify what are some key performance indicators that you need to migrate. What's important to your businesses? Profit margin, customer service levels, on-time delivery, on-time receipts from vendors, inventory accuracy. How are you measuring that? What's the data behind those key performance indicators, and how you're going to put the formula in place so you can keep those metrics? ERP systems are very good at showing these awesome data dashboards and home screens that show some unique data that's right up there that executives, middle management, and super users can use. Well, that's not driven by magic. You really got to make sure there's accurate data behind them that drives those dashboards and key performance indicators. And finally, you may want to add some focus. If you've been doing business for 50 years, there's probably some outdated customer and vendor contact information. Now, I'm never a proponent of deleting data. But again, data is probably your value proposition, something that makes you different from competitors. But can you move that off to the side and not have to implement that into the actual ERP system, but put that into some other environment so that you can access it later, so you have that history and can bring that over? So, with BI and some other popular reporting and server opportunities, you can bring these together if you need to. But don't bring over dirty data. Try to keep that segregated from the rest of the organization. It's also a unique opportunity to apply, to address, inaccurate item descriptions. Get get really OCD, if you will, on your descriptions, your sizes, your unit of measures. What are you trying to do on those item masters? And then I would also suggest keep that old system running as best you can. You might be in read-only mode and have limited access to it, but don't try to bring everything over, even if even all the dirty information, if you call it dirty data. But try to keep that off to one system and really use that system as cleanly as you can. It's an opportunity to do selections. Now, to do that, you may want to apply some Six Sigma techniques. That's testing the data frequency and creating data workshops that look at continuously improving your data importance, the accuracy of the depth of that data. One simple opportunity is to use the 5 whys. And this is really trying to get to the root cause of any data solution or any data problem, obstacle, or opportunity by asking the question, a why question 5 times and trying to find answers each time as you dive deeper and deeper on why a product or data system might fail. This might include like, why don't we have a customer contact information for a specific opportunity? Why is this not in the CRM system? Why is this not collected by sales during the initial process? And how does that initial process bring that data into play? Why do we only have one contact? Why can't we have duplicate contacts across customers and be able to manage the various duplication of customers and why they're duplicated and bring that over? What can we do to make that different? So again, asking the 5 whys can really help identify that data need. So you're making sure you're getting to the level that makes data a unique competitive advantage compared to, again, competitors, colleagues, etc. Summary, like I said earlier, migrating data from an old system to a new system is extremely challenging. Systems don't always behave. Old systems and new systems don't behave. New technologies, new levels of data. I know processes like we recently have issues about how do I invoice? I have to invoice, but then I have to add a tax after the invoice. So you have this chicken and the egg process that you got to work through. And how are you going to do that? Maybe a tax prior to an invoice when you need the invoice to do the taxes. So you run into those little issues. It's going to be complex. And I recommend, again, finding some time with all the necessary super users or people who understand the process and getting together and putting the process together and then identifying what data is needed behind that. There's also historical data issues. So how much historical data and what is the level of detail of that historical data so you can do forecasting, budgeting, and applying algorithms. It's very difficult to do forecasting by region if you've never collected it by region before. It's really that simple. So how are you going to do that? Can you manipulate the data? Can you manage it in another way? Can you add, based on state, based on county, can you add in, some geographical location that makes sense that can allow you to bring that forward? But I know a lot of our customers really struggle with how do I get historical data when my historical data didn't represent what my new forecast is going to look at. But there's ways to manipulate it, and it's going to be the critical path when you do an ERP implementation. Okay, Jennifer, you could talk forever on the subject and still just scratch it, but I can't emphasize enough to have a subset of your project be totally focused on data management. Make it a key component of the implementation, more so than the actual, not more so, but in reliance on just the implementation or the IT components or the server component. Make sure you have a strong group that's analyzing data and making sure it's getting cleaned up and can fit into any new system or upgraded system. Okay.
Thanks, Steve. I liked how you mentioned the 5 whys. I think that really helps the company kind of take an outside perspective about why they're collecting certain data, not taking things for granted of why are we doing it the right way? We always done it this way. So yes, I've really learned a lot today. So thank you, Steve and Ed. Before we wrap up, let's take a look at some questions. We have a few here that came in. Let's see. One of them is, how do I know which is the correct master data?
That's an interesting one, Jennifer. as I mentioned to you when we were talking about data governance, there's not just one element to this question. First of all, people will hire an outside firm to come in and help them clean up and migrate their data. Well, that can be very useful, but it doesn't take care of the job for you. It doesn't answer the question you just asked. A data migration and cleanup company can go through and find out all the places that there's data missing. You have a partial address or an incorrect zip code or something like that. They can find duplicates where you have the same or different customer names at the same address, different customer numbers in your old system for the same customer. They can help you find a lot of those things. But once they find all those anomalies, then someone in your company, a business expert or a group of business experts that know your data and your company, they need to sort it all out. Once they've done that, then the data migration company or the consultant that's doing the implementation can put it into the new system. Another thing that Steve mentioned that we have to think about during the migration process is the new system may require data that isn't there in your existing systems. So once again, you will need to, first of all, identify what that data is, and the data owners, the data team needs to figure out what that new data is, because that's going to enable those new capabilities that Steve mentioned that new ERP systems have. So again, it's no simple answer to that question, but it's a very important one, and it's why data is such an important part of your data migration for a new ERP system. Jennifer?
Thanks, Ed. Another question we have is, what are some steps to clean data?
Sure, I'll take that. It's kind of similar to what I was saying when we, the expert tips section. There are, again, I would apply focus, because it's like eating an elephant. You got to eat it one step or eat it one bite at a time. And where do you want to put that focus? Again, data is just a customer value proposition as a product, as a patent, as how much inventory you might have in your warehouse, or what customer service levels you have. Please keep data at that priority as well. I don't think that's underestimating it at all. But I would take a look and just adding some focus. If you can, are all our zips in the right format? It shouldn't be too difficult, to say that with quotes, to pull in all the zip codes from a field and making sure they're all in the right format, or a zip, or a state, or a county, or a nation. And you can start that small and just expand it necessarily. Ed mentioned there are some now companies are coming online, and they both that specialize in cleaning data. They have mechanisms, they have algorithms, they have logical tests already in place, either for a specific ERP package or just in general. And they can pull data out and identify format changes. So you may want to just look at, is the format in the right place? Then you might want to look at, is the address correct? Is that address even exists? Is it associated with the right city, the right state? Are our item descriptions all looking the same? I find out with many warehouse companies that various product managers put in various different types of descriptions, and being OCD a little bit, you want a kind of a format that you can search on, you can look for, and makes sense, both the warehouse personnel pulling the product as well as salespeople or your customer receiving it, and making sure your descriptions are valid, or at least in a format that makes sense and consistent across product lines. Again, I just pulling it out, dicing up the data, and just rolling up your sleeves and biting that elephant or eating the elephant one step at a time is one way to start until you eat the whole thing. And again, I can't emphasize this. As soon as you've decided maybe you're going to an ERP system, you've selected an ERP system, start the data cleansing process. That should even be an ongoing process, whether doing ERP implementation or upgrade anyway, making sure you're meeting monthly. I talked about Six Sigma and having continuous improvement. One of those should be how lucky or how good is your data? Because there's nothing more frustrating than an executive manager or a CEO. Hey, we delivered a product to the wrong address, or we received a product and it has the wrong cost, and therefore all our profit activities have disappeared. Managing that data and getting a sense of accuracy is so key. But again, let me summarize. As Ed mentioned, there's some wonderful companies out there that can do that data cleansing for you. Already have the tools, algorithms in place that can shortcut it. But you can also just roll up the sleeves and pulling that data out. A lot of your super users probably already know the issues with item descriptions or unit of measures. They're dealing with it on an hourly basis. Put together a continuous improvement project that cleans that up and addresses that. And you can do that prior to any implementation or actually selection. And it's just going to go a lot smoother.
That's a good point, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a good point, Steve. And it's really important to know you don't have to even know what new ERP system you're going to start this cleanup process, because those inconsistencies are there no matter what system you're going to. Yeah, the format that a new system may require might be a little different, but if you start with clean data, it's usually really easy to reformat that data, put the columns in different order, things like that. But getting that data cleaned, and even more important than just getting it clean, you need to have a process in place to keep it clean, so that you don't get back in the same place with your new ERP system that you are today with your old system.
Yeah, you talked about data governance, Eddie, and that's so key. You know, we put this in this webinar in the format of when you go to a new ERP system or upgrade. There's no reason you can't start this, well, other than resources and priorities that a company may go through. Why we can't do cleanup tomorrow? You know, why a company doesn't have a data improvement process now? Because it's so important to your data, to your value proposition, your competitive advantage. I keep repeating that.
Yep. Sometimes companies come in and ask Panorama to evaluate whether they need a new ERP system or not. And sometimes we say, no, your old ERP system is just fine. You just need to clean up your data. So, and you know, there may be some capabilities that old system has that you're not using. So again, not to encourage people to just use their old ERP system, but to make the point that you don't need to know what system you're going to in order to clean up your data and start managing it better.
Thank you, Steve and Ed. I've definitely heard that data migration, data cleansing can take a long time and can hold up a project. So I see why you say to get it done as soon as possible, even before you select a system. So that's all the time.
Oh, can I add on to that? It does take a long time, but I don't want people to be scared of that either. If you start now and you have a methodical approach to it, it's also going to bring you your ROI. It's also going to bring the importance of any improvement project. I'll just say that and end it up. Jennifer, sorry.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions. To conclude today's webinar, I'll do another plug for Panorama Consulting Group. Please visit their website to learn more about preparing your data. Thank you, Steve and Ed, and thank you to our audience. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.